Hello, and I want to welcome you all. We are here for Drag History of Phoenix. This is part of Virtual Arizona Pride and their third Saturday programming. And so they've been doing this for several months. And so I try to do something every month. And so this time we're getting a chance to talk to some amazing stars from our stage right here in Phoenix. So my name is Marshall Shore, and I will be your host. Now, I'm actually the project manager for the Arizona LGBT Plus History Project. And let me get to that screen. So the project really started, so it was a collaboration actually between ASU Phoenix Pride and myself. Now, I will ask if you're joining us on Facebook, if you can do me a favor and click on that share button so that your friends will get to hear some of these amazing stories that we're going to be hearing over the next hour. So we're going to have lots of fun talking to our celebrities. I also want to give it a shout out to Cobalt, who is live streaming us. So even though we are not sitting in a bar, we are in a bar. So the History Project is a collaboration between Pride as well as the BJ Butt Archives over at ASU Libraries. If you would like to learn more about kind of the project, you can always look us up on Facebook, which is AZ Gay History, or follow us on Instagram, which is AZ Gay History as well. And if you want to reach out to me with either questions, you can do that via Facebook, or also good old-fashioned email does work. And that is hello@hiphistorian, which is one of my other monikers that I go by. Now, I thought what would be kind of fun is, so the project really started with the demolition of the 307, which I'm sure that will be the first time that name has been mentioned, but not the last time in this conversation. The 307 was a bar that was kind of infamous. Had lots of drag going on since the early 70s, was demolished, I guess about 6 years ago. And there is actually a plaque on the north side of Roosevelt at about 2nd Street where the bar stood. So you'll be able to see where it was. And it was really a safe space for the community dating back to the 50s. This summer, we also did do a walking tour of Roosevelt for the LGBT community, so you can learn about a documented raid on a gay social club that was there, and people did wind up going to jail for that, and their lives were forever changed by that experience, as well as other spots that are known along kind of what was called the Fruit Loop or the Circuit, kind of that Roosevelt to Portland area. Also, I'm happy to say that earlier this year, Nikolai Derelin, who was a trans man, a Russian gentleman who moved to Chicago, wound up dying here in Arizona in 1906. And they didn't realize until they were ready for burial that he was a woman. He was buried locally without a headstone. And so through community support, we were able to raise funds and actually get him a headstone, and working with folks over at Transspectrum and a handful of other people as well, made sure that the headstone was respectful to who he was as well in that time frame. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the drag history of Arizona. Now, the first documented case we can find at this moment of a drag queen in Arizona would be 1894. Who knew Tombstone was kind of our drag central? And that was William Gause. He was a famous African-American female impersonator. He would come out and sing in his real voice. And then at the end of the show would basically show that he indeed was not a woman. Then you also have Stuart the Male Patty, who was also in Tombstone about the same time period. Male Patty, there was a well-known opera singer whose first name was Patty. And so that became kind of a slang for a drag queen as well. So someone calling themselves a patty or a male patty at that point. Later on in like the early 1910s, you had Julian Elting. And so he was one of the first Hollywood stars. And he would actually appear on screens across the country, including here in Arizona. He would also do live theater presentations and did a lot of them in Tucson. And his shtick was he would be in a movie and for some reason would have to dress in drag. So it was always kind of the same gag over and over. But even that back in 1910s was pretty amazing at a time where someone caught on the street dressed in drag could easily be thrown in jail or kicked out of town. Then you have Ray Bourbon, who was a nationally known drag queen who performed all over the country and actually performed here at one of the first bars that we can document, which was a lesbian bar at Central and Southern in South Phoenix. And it was called Kay's Happy Landing. And Kay Elledge had been a musician in Ray's band. And so he would often come back and perform at her place for him. He also did perform at various other places between Tucson and Phoenix as well. There are records of his performances. And then you have folks like Lee Leonard, who in the 50s was based out of Phoenix. He would perform in Tucson as well as Globe. I was just chatting with one of our guests, and I can't imagine the audience, what that would have been like in Globe in the 50s. So I wish I could find more information about him. We know very little. I was able to find out that it looks like in the 80s, he had an antique store somewhere here in the Valley. And then back in 1961, so basically all these drag queens prior were using their real voice. And then there was a group out of the Midwest called Phono Fools. And they were called pantomime. So they were lip syncing. And they were so popular that they brought them into Scottsdale in the early 60s and were a huge hit and performed quite a bit around the country as well as here. I do want to give a huge shout out to the Queer Music Heritage website, which documents Phono Fools. And actually one of the performers has his scrapbook, which is kind of amazing to be able to flip through and get that history. Again, here is more information. If you'd like to reach out to the History Project at some point, please feel free to do that. Because, you know, best stories actually come from people just sharing their own experience. Uh-oh. All right. So let's bring on some guests. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Millye.
Hello.
Hey. Hi, Marshall.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all a chance to just kind of introduce yourselves. So I will call you out kind of in the order on screen. And so that way you can just kind of talk about your connection to the drag community. Because I know some of you have been on stage as a drag queen. Some of you may not have been on stage as a drag queen, but you have amazing connections. And so just kind of set the tone of where you're all coming from. I thought that would be kind of a fun thing. So Davina, I will give you the first shot at it.
What?
I didn't hear that, Marshall.
Oh, yeah. So if you can just do a brief introduction of yourself, kind of when you started performing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Hey, everybody. I'm Teddy Rodriguez, a.k.a.
Davina, Ross. Your sound is terrible. We can barely hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's better.
Hey, everybody. I'm Teddy Rodriguez, also known as Devina Ross. I began my illustrious career in the art of female impersonation back in 1984 at a bar called Shamoos, which was located on 24th Street and Thomas. I wound up entering an amateur drag contest in July of 1984 and won on my first try out of 9 contestants. And after that, the show director at Shamoos at the time wound up asking me to come in and do a guest, and he eventually hired me as a full-time cast member, and I haven't stopped working since. So that means that I'm celebrating being in this business called drag this year for 36 years. So I've worked at several bars as a regular.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That you may remember 307, which was mentioned earlier, Winks, Pookies, and currently I'm working regularly at a bar called Charlie's on 7th Avenue in Camelback as a regular, like, guest, I guess, in that kind of way. So very, very lucky to still be working. Also, before the pandemic hit, I had a monthly show at Stacy's, so hopefully that will come back soon. But I am very proud to announce that I just got asked to do my first live gig post-COVID. I'll be making a guest appearance at Charlie's on Monday with Pussy LaHoot, complete with the new COVID-19 standards. I'm going to be wearing a transparent face shield, but it's the first time I've performed live in front of an audience since March the 16th of this year. So very much looking forward to that. That's what I have for you then. Back to you, Marshall.
All right. Thank you so much, Davina, and congratulations on 36 years on the stage. That's amazing. All right, and Darryl?
Hi, everyone. My name is Darryl. Let's see, I came out to my first gay bar at 17 years old in 1975, as did this one right here. And we all...
Do you have to separate you two? Are you two going to be a problem being right there next to each other?
Oh, my God, I'm on top.
Strange. But
so back in the day, you know, being a senior in high school in Phoenix, Tempe, and coming out to gay bars, the first bar that I ever went to was called Casa de Roma, and it was on 16th Street, just above Indian School. And well, that was in 1973, before I had the courage to actually go into a gay bar. The first gay bar I ever went into was Sportsman's Lounge on 7th Street. It was right around that time, my senior year in high school, when I was 17, that I did meet Quentin. And back then, you know, 1975, 76, as the disco era was like beginning and booming in Phoenix, which was actually a very amazing time in Phoenix, and sparkling and energetic, and it was on the map. People couldn't believe how vibrant Phoenix's nightlife was. It was off the chain, on par with New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. And when we would go to other cities, they seemed like kind of contained to me, right, Quentin? It was
absolutely.
So, you know, back then, you know, it's like us little gay boys would be, you know, dressing in drag and wearing makeup and stuff like that. And the big drag bar at the time was Casa de Roma. And there was a Native American, as I'm Native American also, drag queen, and his name was Woo Woo, Miss Woo Woo. And Miss Woo Woo performed at Casa de Roma as Diana Ross. I mean, the most impeccable, incredible, absolute clone of Diana Ross. And she was just like the queen. You know, I mean, there were a lot back then, but she was really quite a performer that did Diana Ross. And we got to know her, me and my friend Junior, and then she asked us to be the Supremes for her. So we were like, why not? So we ended up working with Miss Woo Woo at Casa de Roma when she would do Diana Ross and the Supremes, and we were her Supremes. So I was always a backup. But eventually, you know, we would do our own shows and stuff, and then Casa de Roma would let me do a couple of numbers. In fact, I did a number with Quentin and it was Mary Wells. What was it called? The Telephone Guy?
Telephone Man or something like that.
Telephone Man by Mary Wells.
Yeah, yeah.
And Quentin was my telephone man.
I love
Performance. Do you remember that, Quentin?
I absolutely do. Hey, Lolly, I'm your telephone man. Absolutely, I remember.
Yeah, and then we performed at different events, and there was the Emperor and Empress, like whatever that was, competition that was at the Coronado Hotel, or the Adams Hotel, I'm sorry, downtown, which was a very, very big event. And I remember we did this whole 17-minute live, Diana Ross live at the Forum or something routine, and we had it down. It was choreographed and everything. I think we brought in about $1,000 in tips during that show. It was pretty incredible. But anyway, so that was kind of my thing. And there was another very interesting queen. His name was Lloyd, and rest in power, Lloyd. He was my drag mother. And he gave me my name, and his name was Sonova. His name was Nova, and he gave me my name, Sonova. So I was like the little star. Anyway, so that's kind of my little thing. I'm a makeup artist and a hairstylist in Los Angeles now, and the last time I performed was in 1995 in Gloria Estefan's Everlasting Love video. I'm the one with the red page, Bob page in the video. So if you click on YouTube and look at Everlasting Love, Gloria Estefan, I'm the one with the red bob, wearing the silver.
Nice. All right, Miss Millye, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am the sister of Miss Ebony, so I had to be in the shadows because it wasn't safe for a girl that was trans to be out. So I had to continue to be myself, and the blessing came because I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue in 1975. And that gave me the opposition and the position to rub nose and foo-foo, honey, with, people of all sorts. And my brother came to Arizona, and it was life-changing because growing up in Detroit and Chicago and being caught up in the 1968 riots and our mother's death at that time, we had a lot of issues and a lot of things we had to conquer. And along the way, we met Quentin, and it changed our lives. Because at that time, it was very much so bits and pieces of entertainment. And they were judged. You had to come out and do and stand on your head in order to get the Wednesday night spot. And I am so blessed to look at the history and see the survivors and say, oh my God, this is the history of Phoenix, and look what it has morphed into today. Thank you for doing what you do and put a portion of my life, because I had to start out as a drag queen in order for me to become my woman. And in that, it opened many, many doors for me. However, being accepted and being a part of the community is just beginning to be put together. It took Regina Wells and I to come together and put the transgender Trailblazers together because there were drag queens. And I thought, if we're all gay and a part of this tree, and here are the branches, how can you remove me because I have tits? Thank you for this moment. And I'm just, Davina, thank you. Oh, thank you for doing the work. I'm blessed to see all of us that are here and talking about this, because the drag queens was pushed to the side. Now, you know what they were going to do, honey, with the boy that had it cut off. Please, I wasn't going to go through that. I knew I had a life, and I made it for me. And now that I'm an old woman with that history and a part of the drag culture as well, this is a blessing. Oh my, these are the flowers that Miss Ebony would always say, when you come around to me, let me know. I'm smelling the flowers. Oh, baby, thank you. Keep the conversation going.
Thank you as always, Millye. And Barbara.
I don't want to follow Miss Millye.
Right?
Good trouble.
I love you, Mel. Hi,
I know,
everybody.
I love this. Thank you.
I'm Richard Stevens, Barbara Seville, and I started doing drag here in Phoenix mid-90s. Was not very successful at first. Well, let me back up. I started in a teen youth group, like the grand tradition of we need to raise money, let's put on a show. I did a show to raise money for the Phoenix Gay and Lesbian Youth Group. We raised about $1,000. I was only 18 or 19 at that time, so I wasn't old enough to get into a bar or anything. Then I got a fake ID, again, grand tradition of drag, fraudulent schemes. Got into a couple of talent shows, did not win on my first try like Davina. Got told no over and over and over. And in my opinion, and in my experience, and in my history, really dealt with some like vipers of drag who were very paranoid and did not want to let anyone new into the scene. And through just persistence and maybe talent, I don't know, I managed to push through and get a weekly show of my own, and then 2 weekly shows of my own, and then win the titles here in Arizona, and really just find a place for myself, because at the time nobody was making a spot for me. So that's sort of my story, but to get to that, you know, it's just so many amazing things came. I always tell people that I had a lot of opportunities come to me, and I was smart enough to pay attention to them. And some of those opportunities included letting me write a column for Echo Magazine, hosting a show on Kiss FM, doing a cross-country tour for a rock band, appearing in a music video, appearing in a Pepsi commercial. And now, like, I don't know, I mean, drag is just so super mainstream that I feel like I go through and I sort of, I benefit from the work of all these different people in all these other squares. So that's where I am, that's who I am. And I perform weekly at the Barbara Seville Show, monthly at Blush Drag Brunch, all over town. I don't know, that's it, really.
I mean, I would go as far to say you're probably one of the busiest drag queens I know at the moment, just because of all the different things you're doing, which is great.
Oh, she's busy. Oh, she's busy. Okay.
I definitely am a hustler. I am a hustler. And I'm also wearing a Barbara Please t-shirt available at barbaraplease.com.
Now, you know I love it.
All right, and Quentin, your turn.
Hi, Marshall. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Quinn.
It is so nice to be here with the rest of you all, and of course, in the context of the conversation. I mean, I started after I was just out of high school and was dancing, and I became actually the Arizona State Bump Championship. The Arizona State Bump Champion. That was my first little title. And my dance partner, Darryl, you'll remember her, and certainly Millye, you will as well. Vicky, Miss Vicky, took me into a nightclub called Maggie's. And it was a signature nightclub just south of 16th Street and Indian School. and it was the signature dance bar of its time. And the DJ there, Jack Weatherby, was known by Casablanca Film Works and Records. He was really legendary in that sense, which we didn't know. But when I walked into that floor, and it was a lit dance floor from the bottom, and walked through the back room and saw Mr. George, who was a drag queen that many, except for Darryl and Millye, might only remember. And then, of course, Lady Ebony, and then Cassandra, and some of the founding, well, for me, founding, like you, I was educated at the entry of this podcast or presentation by the history going back. And what I want to tell you really quickly, Marshall, is that Lee Leonard owned Sunset Boulevard, which was a thrift store that had vintage older clothing that was really at a very high level. And I never knew about his drag persona. So back in the day, in the late 70s, the early 80s, called Sunset Boulevard. So I started to hang out at Maggie's and started to dance and established because then during our era, you established your territory in a certain way. And we had a certain group of people that we hung out with. We were called the A group. That was the name that we gave ourselves. We were called the A group. And so anyway, that was it. And we would always come out in our best thrift outfits and fashion looks and rule the corner of the dance floor and compete in all the dance contests around the city. And so the connecting dot is that good Lady Ebony asked me to be the choreographer of her act, as her being Gladys Knight and me being one of her pips. And I said, absolutely. So that took me to the Casa de Roma. And at the Casa de Roma, I just really flourished through. If anybody ever knew Eb, knew that Maurice Carter was more than just a quote unquote drag queen. He was a mentor. He was a guide. He certainly gave me so much information about how to be a upstanding gay person. And I believe, Millye, he's the first Miss Black Chicago.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
he was the trailblazer before he came out, and also he was with Dr. Bob established the VD clinic here as a nurse and
Yes.
some other things. So this is the introduction to our gay community that I had as a pip. We toured around Tucson and all over the bars and stuff, and I gained a sort of name for myself in the gay community through my presentation with Eb, and I started to choreograph the production numbers that we would do at the shows there at Casa. Not only the pips, but because the old shows that the queens don't know about today, the old shows, baby, you didn't just walk in and get a spot in the show, especially at the Casa de Roma. You had to audition. You had to win an amateur night, and each show, if you didn't have a persona, like for example, if you weren't a Diana Ross or a Liza Minnelli or someone beyond just a boy in a dress, you couldn't be there because the regulars in that show were Sissy Goldberg, a stand-up comedian of national note, and then we had our own Judy Garland, and so forth and so on, and the legendary Ebony. So I became a male lead through my talent as a dancer and choreographing the shows there. And so I've since went into, I was with La Marche Casablancas there in Scottsdale, which was the Casablancas affiliate. I moved from them to Eileen Ford's affiliate there called Ford Robert Black, which is still in business there. So that sprungboarded me out of Phoenix, Arizona to the region through commercials and other kind of works and to the world. And so that's sort of my story. But it was all as a case of me coming through as a pip for for Lady Ebony. And so, and I'll have one other quick story, which is to the gentleman above me here on the screen, which is Darryl Redleaf. And this man was my running buddy. We were running mates back in the day, and he was in the East Valley. I was in the Northeast Valley. I think you came up through Tempe, wasn't it, Darryl?
Right.
Okay, and so I was from Paradise Valley, and so we were both Eastern Valley boys, and we would kind of hang out, and we just. And this is the other thing that I want to say is that unlike the community seemingly today that's more involved politically and more involved socially, it seems what we had was a bit more ownership of our gay community back in the 70s, because what we were was a marginalized community who had to stand up for ourselves and who had to be consolidated with ourselves. So we would take care of each other as a community, and protect each other from the people who wanted to either bash us or hurt us or whatever. There was a lot of solidarity around that. All of the bar owners would throw what you were talking about. One of the people earlier was talking about was a big pageant. Phil Santhon, one of the bar owners, would throw that big pageant every year, give away thousands of dollars because he owned clubs to uplift LGBTQ people. So I want to make that note about the historic context that I think has been lost a bit with us now, being internet, isolated by the internet without any need to commingle and socialize, and certainly identify as a community in person that way, because these were our safe spaces, these clubs. So this is the way that I came through, and I'm still like the biggest fan of drag, of course, and Barbara and Davina can certainly probably attest to that. I mean, I will uplift and support all of my performing brothers and sisters. But I never did drag, but I was always a male lead. I was the male lead. You have to have a Lionel Richie to your Diana Ross. You have to have a male lead and back in the vernacular, to look real fish, you've got to have a man standing next to you, baby. That's a real man. Okay, so I would be the boy Candy, while they would be the girl Candy, if you will. So there you have it, Marshall. That's my context to this conversation.
All right. Well, I'm gonna try something that I don't know if will work, but let's see. Hey, okay. So Tim Dunn, who also performed in the Valley as Zenobia, is actually in the audience, and so he chatted a nice little hello to all of you.
Hey Tim. Hey Zenobia.
Hey.
And that
Zenobia?
he was performing here in the 80s, and then basically left to go perform en Lacage in LA, as well as Vegas. So so I think going with the fact that some of you, I know Darryl talked about Miss Woo Woo, we have Zenobia. Who are some of those other queens that were performing that we may not hear about much anymore? I mean, you mentioned like Sissy Goldberg, Tish Tanner.
Well, I'll just kind of dive in really quickly because, like I said, I choreographed at a lot of those shows for the girls, either in their individual numbers or for bar owners for their productions to keep them exciting, because we used to have what we called real cabaret in town, right? And so through my works as a model and these kind of things, I kind of toured around to different places and saw different things, right? But I was also the entertainment director at IBT's in Tucson for a decade, which is the signature gay bar down in Tucson. And so I saw a lot of the girls. In Phoenix, the girls, I would say, are Barbara Seville, Celia Putty. I mean, I'm talking about from a historic context. We used to have Cassandra, Lady Joanne, Woo Woo, Penelope Poupe. Thank you, Barbara.
Danny Reed was Liza.
Liza. Tish Tanner. Tish Tanner was legendary in town. And then down in Tucson, we had from this same era back in the late 70s, early 80s, who are still working now, Lucinda Holliday, I have to mention Lucy, and then the Black Cat, baby. We can't forget the Black Cat, Miss Aja Simone. She's amazing. Miss Faith Michaels is now in Florida, in Key West, doing things. And there are many, many that I'm not mentioning, but I'm just saying from this historic context, there were only so many, like I said, that could really work on the shows, because if you could do between 10 and 15 different numbers, you couldn't just come in and do a couple numbers, baby, because there were only 4 queens in the show, and the show went on for 2 hours, right? So you had to have am I lying, Davina? And Barbara, help me out. You had to have, a good 15 minutes of material on your own. Even as a male lead, we would do triples. I would do triples, right? And then there would be 3 rotations. So yeah, it was none of this walk in with 1 or 2 numbers, baby, and run up on stage. You had to have costumes. You had to have production. There was this. I'm not being mean about the evolution of drag now, but I call it a little bit of a dragathon now. Is what I call it. It's like serial drag or a dragathon. It's not as much a production where you have an opening production, a middle production, and a closing production. But so some of the girls were. Who were some of the other girls, Daryl, that you remember? There was Woo Woo. There was Charlene Champagne. There was Tamara. Bronzy DeMarco.
I just met Magnolia. I just met Magnolia on Facebook from back in the day.
There you go.
And Musala.
Musala. Somebody just mentioned Musala in the chat. Charlene Champagne.
Charlene Champagne was John Thomas. John Thomas was one of the Pips. The 3 original Pips were Russell Taft, John Thomas, and myself, Quentin Jenkins. Russell Taft was one of our early casualties to the HIV/AIDS virus, and so we lost him early. But John, and then James Taylor, the only white Pip that there ever was, filled in when Russell Taft left. But John Thomas became Charlene Champagne, and she would do a mean Amy Stewart, Knock on Wood, and these kind of Gloria Gaynor, etc. But
then back in the day, it wasn't just Casa de Roma. It was Diamond Lil's. Every bar had a drag night, so everybody rotated from Casa was like the main hub on the Friday and Saturday nights, but then the rest of the bars throughout the week all had drag nights. So
there was Grand Camel, there was Farrah's, there was Shamoos, there was
Diamond Lil's.
Diamond Lil's. There was even a straight bar on where Charlie's is now. A couple buildings west of there was a place called Tommy's Copa West, and Tommy's Copa West was a straight bar. Tommy Casellas owned it, but he had a penchant for the drags and used to have drag shows. And then I would bring the Men of Playgirl, one of the other productions that I would be bringing through, the Men of Playgirl, through there. So there was Preston's a little bit later on, but there was Forum Boardwalk. Newtown has always been there, but Newtown hasn't been so big on drag. But Newtown, Preston's though certainly had a regular drag appearance. But there was Diamond Lil, Shamoos back in the day, Grand Camel. Oh, and then on North Central, Paris After Dark. Paris After Dark was a club that existed that was a real cabaret. Didn't last for very long, only 3 or 4 years, but they brought like Rip Taylor, they brought the genuine art, they brought Ant, the comedian Ant, and some of the Leah Deloria, some of those. So it was more cabaret. It did drag, but it was more a dinner theater kind of show. So, but yeah, there've been so many amazing, and I'm sorry to them. that I don't have them right at the forefront of my head. Barbara, I mean, I'm sure you have some more girls that were from the context of your time, because I met Barbara at the old Foster's where Stacy's is now, used to be called Foster's. And Jay Foster, the owner, actually still bartends sometimes there now. But the point of it is that you, Celia Putty, who else was in the shows with you there?
Well, I consider
Barbara?
myself a part of the school of drag with Celia Phaedra, Chantel Douglas,
There, thank you.
Topaz Crawford, Candy Collet.
Candy Collet.
We kind of came, I would say, right behind Davina's class, and Davina kind of came right behind like Pussy LaHoot's class, and like I that's how I look at it. Is like there's always like some sort of a generation, and that was my generation.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm trying to, make sure that we, give homage to folks. And Davina, who are some of the folks that you most remember, because you came through at a certain time with, I think yours was like Candy Collet and Casey Starr. We cannot forget Miss Casey Starr.
No, don't forget the baby.
So
yeah, well, as far as my particular generation of drag, there were so many, but a lot of the entertainers that were in my class, they wound up not really hanging around too much longer, actually. So I'm kind of like the last one, because I would say that the Pussy LaHoot and Tamara were the generation before me, and
right.
I agree with what Barbara was saying, that that after my generation came her particular generation of drag, that with and I'm going to just all the names that Barbara shouted out there, especially that was during the time that really, as I was coming up, the pageants really became very forefront in regards to really as far as coming about in the scene, as far as defining drag, because of the fact that we were now part of the Miss Gay America pageant system, and so we were that wound up really influencing a lot of the drag that we were starting to see. I know it did for me, because I wound up going to compete at Miss Gay America a couple times and enjoyed myself immensely. But it really is amazing to see that, really, if you really get right down to it, that as every generation comes along, every generation has its own style, its own voice, its own way that they express themselves, and which I think is great. So, funny story, that when I was working the 307, a lot of those entertainers, were from what I call the old school at the time. That was Lady Cassandra, Tish Tanner, Felicia Farr,
Weta.
And they were very much into doing what I call more of the cabaret style type of numbers, which was very in at the drag scene at the time. And during my generation, I came along right when MTV came about, so I was wanting to do MTV style drag. I was doing Jody Watley, I was doing Janet Jackson in the 80s. And then of course they kind of looked at me in my little Jody Watley drag with my black can skirt and my little bustier and big hoop earrings and my spiral curl hair. And Miss Ebony looked at me one time at the 307, and I'll never forget it. It's one of my favorite stories. She just looked at me and said, "And who are you supposed to be?"
The Abusa. Famous words of the Abusa.
Yes, and then she looked at me. She said, "You have that can skirt on. There's supposed to be a skirt up over that, right?" I said, "That's not the way Jody wears it, girl. She just wears it like this." And it like I said, it just, every generation. It's like when you talk about people, music and different generations, it's the same thing. It's different generation as a drag, as far as style and different types of the way they express themselves. But I am very amazed, though, as the our particular scene has evolved and all the different types of style and different drag has evolved. I'm amazed at how mainstream it's become, because Barbara mentioned that. And I will have to just give you props, Ms. Barbara Seville, for being a trailblazer on making that mainstream, because of the fact that I thought when you had your show on 104.7 FM on KZZP, lather, rinse, repeat, I was all like,
Yes, yes.
now how did that happen? And so I would probably say, Barbara's generation was a huge push to really make drag acceptable mainstream, because when I was coming up, when I was a young pup, it was still underground, and it was still kind of an underground kind of like a best kept secret that straight people could come to the show and have a great time and be entertained. But I would probably say Barbara's generation and afterwards are really the ones. That's why we have a RuPaul's Drag Race that's being accepted by the masses today, and everybody knows about drag queens. So
I was with you 100% until you said accepted, because I think sometimes we conflate acceptance for monetization, and I feel like that's really what has happened. Is I think that there are still people who watch Drag Race who would vote against your rights and call you a faggot in a hallway, who love RuPaul's Drag Race and love sissy tutorials on YouTube. I don't know how much acceptance there is.
Really?
Just based on drag. I really don't.
Well, but Richard, that sort of speaks back to this thing. Like I was thinking, like during what I call our time, when if you were wearing drag in the day, you had to be able to pass. I met Millye in Saks Fifth Avenue at noon and walked up to her thinking that she just having a connection to her because she was another brown-skinned person. That was my attraction. I had no idea, that she was a part of our community.
The impossible woman.
You're right. In her unique way. I had no idea. So you had to be able to pass. So this is the thing. Like, it was a real art of illusion. We knew, like Helen, back in the day, that would pick up trade and stuff during the day as a woman, but was a man. So it's all about your craft, being able to bring that real illusion to life, not underneath some lighting and everything like that, but to have a real craft. Now I think that the RuPaul's thing is, elevated the artistry of drag. I do think that. I mean, what's your idea, Darryl? You're a makeup artist, so.
I think the thing is that the true pioneers and the true trailblazers is Millye and Lloyd and Regina and Indian Ricky and all those queens that were presenting as a woman, and back then it wasn't like trans or drag queen, because a drag queen could be working at a bar and then take it all off, and there's this truck driver you're looking at. But these women that were living their lives as true women, in our community, are truly the ones that we went to when we were getting harassed or somebody was going to beat us, because these bitches would pull. They were, if you messed with any of them, they would fuck you up. And if you knew that if you were being fucked with and you called one of them, you called Regina. I mean, Regina was one of the fiercest of them back then, and you had to be her friend or forget it, honey. No. I mean, there was clear division back then in groups of people. And I don't want to say classes, but it was like those of us that were ethnic and kind of drag and trans and stuff, we all kind of gravitated together, Then there was the other whole 70s gay, macho, mustache, village people type clones that were out there. But
Tom of Finland. I call those Tom of Finland.
But it was truly the ones that, like, if I had any trouble, I went to Regina and Lloyd, and they would just go kick those motherfuckers' asses. And they were the fiercest of the queens, and they presented as women.
Yeah, but so the other context I would just want to toss in real quickly is that the drag, female illusion, like Ebony used to say, is just that. You're an illusionist. But I mean, Marshall, I'm sure the words boy drag don't fall on your deaf ears, I'm sure, because, you know, it's like we did have Tom and Finland. I mean, the men would have to be, like I said, I never did female drag, but I certainly have my drag, baby. I would be
right. I mean, you had like the whole clone look where everybody wanted to look alike in the red and black flannel, the big porn stash, Levi 501.
Everybody was in drag.
It was just a different form of drag.
501 jeans with those waffle stomper boots that it got me. So we had I called it boy drag, the Western wear, you know. So I mean, drag is. I mean, the art of drag is being promoted as a certain thing, but we all have. I mean, in the gay community that I know and the people that I talk to have their own sense of drag. There were, because we, like I said, we were the A group, and we would come through with zoot suits, and we were voguing before Vogue. We called it posing, and so like pose was, we were doing that as a way to establish an identity for ourselves and as a way to come through and be distinctive. Even before I became a real professional model, this was something that I had a penchant for, was boy drag. So I would wear suits, I would wear different kinds of things to set myself apart from, and I'm still somewhat like that today. I have to come through together a certain way. You have to represent, darling. Not always. Well, this is it. And so
so we've talked about some of those former stars. I'm always amazed by the number of stories about Tish Tanner's performances.
Tish Tanner,
I mean, how about share some of those, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know who Tish Tanner was, or some of her kind of signature performance.
I just found a couple of Tish Tanner shots because, like I said, I became with Ebony after we left the Casa de Roma, and we were short-lived at Harpo's, a bar called Harpo's, and basically Penelope Poupée became the show director there. So many of us, minorities, to be quite straightforward, left and were given an opportunity to have our own show at Sammy's Steakhouse. Sammy Sedita gave us our own show there, and so so Tish Tanner came with us at Sammy's Steakhouse, and so it was Joanne, Tish Tanner, Roxy Goldie O'Brien, Roxy O'Shea, Roxy O'Shea, Jamie DeSario, were some of our regulars at that show. And so
tell me a little about Jamie. That's the first time I think I've heard the name Jamie Rosario.
Quentin, I have
Jamie
to correct you. Jamie
DeSario
is not part of that generation, darling. She came through with Shamoos with me. She's one of my peers.
Yeah, but I mean, she would float around and do little guest appearances, though, because I remember Miss Jamie and Miss Roxy O'Shea, and I found a picture. I'm slowly posting, like, on 80s drag. I found a picture of Carmen Del Rio, who I just put through photos on the Arizona 80s drag. She was a diva that came down from Vegas and would
Quentin, focus. We were talking about Tish Tanner.
Well, I know, but I'm saying they're all from the same time.
What are some of those iconic performances? I mean, when people talk about Tish, they talk about certain performances. What were some of those things that
Salvation Army was one of them.
And what was Salvation Army?
Salvation Army was Hallelujah, hallelujah. Put a nickel in the drum, save another
this old 60s skit about somebody finding their savior, and she had just mashed it together with different. That was really what Tish was. I would say what I best knew Tish for was she would just put these this pastiche of different songs and sound clips. I wonder if Cassandra made those for her looking back, but
she did.
Yeah, did she?
She did.
That makes sense.
I loved her "The Hole in the Bucket."
Oh yes, with Jim Stevens.
Yes.
Another male lead. Yeah, but so yeah.
But she was just really known in a time where high glamour and high camp was so appreciated and so center stage. She really sort of walked on the outside of that, with just like her bald head and a braid, instead, not even a full wig, just a braid, or house dresses. And I would say even like her aesthetic was almost divine-like at that time. Would you say that?
Yeah,
I would say that.
Davina?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And when she was accepted to go to Las Vegas and play Las Vegas, that was the highlight of her life.
Can I jump in there really quickly?
She did I Want Money.
Yeah.
And there we are.
But that's, Miss Millye just touched on something that is a common theme in Arizona drag, and that is people have constantly dipped into our community to find some of the best drag. Darryl, mentions he was in the Gloria Estefan video. I'm not sure if he was part of the Phoenix scene at that time or not, but our drag scene has always, even when it has been underappreciated in our community, it has always had some strong characters that have been celebrated nationwide.
Yes.
Or like you said, they tapped her to come to Vegas. They tapped Jamie DeSario to go be Marilyn Monroe in Vegas, and Dolly Parton. Kenneth Blake was headlining in Vegas for years.
And Tim became
Tim Dunn. Absolutely.
Did Dionne Warwick, and still for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dionne, he did it to such a high degree that Dionne Warwick herself is a fan on his page. So, pretty high level. Who out of Tucson, Arizona. He's in Laughlin and does a share. I'm going to think of his name. Came with
Andrew Raymer.
Andrew Raymer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then what about like Sissy Goldberg? I've heard a little bit about Sissy, but she seemed to be everywhere. I've seen ads for her doing fundraisers with Rusty Warren back in the day for ARC and other things. So tell me about Sissy Goldberg.
Well, I give Barbara a lot of credit because he's one of the people who, in the extension of the kind of person who can stand up with a microphone and really entertain a crowd. It's an art. It's like a stand-up, being a stand-up comedian. Sissy Goldberg, why I thought of that, Keith Morris is his name, was capable of, just with a microphone, slaying the room on an improvisational basis, like the best of the comedians ever were. And Rusty Warren was a comedian who had a hit back in the day called Knockers Up or Bottoms Up and did
it was Knockers Up.
Okay, and so there you have that. But Keith Morris was that national kind of sarcastic, sharp-witted, sharp-tongued, quick-witted comedian, which didn't have to go to the, oh, how are you motherfuckers in here tonight? Oh, what are you doing, sons of bitches? Oh, you're all fucked up, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't that level. It was real heady.
Well, he was a trained actor. He was an absolute theater major, trained actor, accomplished, and his material was worked on. It was acerbic. It was phenomenal. He could have been in New York and been a star. Gigantic, because never did he repeat any of his routine ever. And he was so quick and so fast that we took notes from him in order to read other queens, because he was just beyond.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was sort of akin to a gay William F. Buckley, kind of heady, knowledgeable, linguistically fluid comedic talent.
Who was this again?
Sissy Goldberg.
Oh, okay.
Goldberg.
And then would come out in a bell gown, ringing those bells after she had read the whole audience, ringing and shaking the bells. You better ring those bells. in an evening gown.
Liza Minnelli's Ring Them Bells.
With all the bells underneath the skirt.
Yes. Yes.
It was crazy.
So
And then Lady Cassandra did a number called
Up in a Puff of Smoke.
Up in a Puff of Smoke. And she was the, like all the queens that tuck now learned it from her, because her outfit, when she spun, because she spun in a circle when singing that number, and the layers of chiffon would fly up like a tornado. And I don't know if she had fans blowing them up in the air as she was spinning, but her like coochie was like a woman. I mean, it was.
She would also do A Long Way from St. Louis, and it was a burlesque number that she recreated, and she would just literally strip through the whole number and end up on the bar with no bra, and then unsnap her G-string and be holding her male parts in her hand, and you never ever saw anything crass, anything offensive, and the illusion was never broken. Long Way from St. Louis. I mean, it was like Gypsy Rose Lee brought into more modern times in a classy. I just never saw anything like it.
Into a standing ovation.
Oh yes, but if you wanted to be entertained, honey, you had to go and see Miss Tamara jump 2 tables. Lucy. That was the entertainment.
In the Phoenix Drag, there was something about that, how she would leap over a couple of tables with people laying on it and make it.
Yes, baby, doing Lucy.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by Natalie Cole.
Oh gosh, those were the days.
What about like a performer like Musala, which I've heard a little bit about, but I really don't know that much about Musala.
I hate to keep being the one that talks through this all, and I'm sorry, Richard, but Musala was at this Casa de Roma, and Musala, her name is Musala. So Musala was a fairly hefty girl. And because I was doing everything with Ebony and lifting the girls, and I was the male lead, one of the male leads, she would want me to lift her. And her signature songs were like Vicky Sue Robinson, Turn the Beat Around. And she would songs. So she was a disco diva. She would spin.
Yes, she could walk the bar.
She was
at 6'2" and 250.
And I would have to lift girlfriend and make her look like she was, a petite, a little,
and spin her.
We call them and do lifts with her. Yeah, we call them fish. When a boy really looks female, back in the vernacular, back in the day, they were true fish. And if you were really real, you were sushi, honey. You were sushi. You were like the freshest, most delicate, freshly caught and filleted fish.
See, and we were the up and comer little fishes that were rising, and we were giving realness. We weren't doing drag with wigs or anything. We used our own hair. We never used boobs. It was like we would go to Judy's and we would steal an outfit. We would call it shopping back then, and they didn't have those little tags, and you could go to Metro Center and Judy's and go pick out an outfit for the night.
Yes, Boost Queen. Yes, Boost Queen.
Well,
what was Judy's?
Judy's, there was a store. It was a chain store called Judy's Gear for Guys.
No, and that was a women's clothing.
Oh, you're talking about the other Judy's. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
for guys was inside Judy's.
Yeah, exactly. And they would go
and then we would go to Saks, and Miss Millye was working there, and we would go tip into like the cosmetics department and steal the testers of makeup. And I remember we were always trying to find this one eyeshadow. It's by Revlon. It was called Super Frost Gold Leaf. And honey, and if you were real fish, honey, you would be wearing Charles Jourdan pumps.
Yes, baby, and fragments.
Let me quote the
Exciting.
Abusa. Let me quote Miss Ebony. Real as ice water and twice as chilly, bitch. Real as ice water.
That's exactly it.
Because
But-
for us, the point was like to pick up a trick that was like kind of married and kind of straight, and then he would be like surprised, you know, because we were given realness, honey.
That was the whole idea, is to be so real that, you know, if it was it live. That was the other vernacular. Was it live or was it Memorex, darling?
Well, drag has changed so much now that a realness look is so. I assume that it will come back, because I know when I first started doing drag, like you said, that was the goal. But it has turned into such like caricature, clowning, and I say that with love, by the way, and I include myself in that. But caricature, clowning, 7 wigs, 13 pairs of lashes, and not being mistaken for a woman. And I put that at the feet of RuPaul. I remember when RuPaul was blogging, one time she wrote about getting to a gig in Amsterdam, the city, not the bar, and her bags hadn't arrived, and the club promoters said, "Oh well, we can take you, and we'll buy you whatever you want." And she just said, "Oh no. I don't. What I do, the kind of drag that I do, I don't ever want to look out in the audience and see somebody wearing what I'm wearing." And I thought, oh wow, that makes sense when you put it that way. But drag has just changed so much now that realness has turned into something that is just so bizarre. They'll say it's strawberry realness, but they are dressed as a strawberry, bitch. Like they're just going in such crazy directions. But like I said, I bet it comes back, because there's only so far you can go. History always repeats itself. So I think that hyper feminine drag will come back, and I think it'll come back soon.
Well, I think that with the acronym of the LGBTQTIA LMNOP, there's such a gigantic of the rainbow. There's every flavor you can imagine out there. So it just there's no division anymore. It's just all, either you're real or you're way over here on steroids, and it's lovely. It's wonderful, but it was really interesting, and looking back to have been a part of that in the mid 70s, and bringing that forward to our little town of Phoenix, which I always keep saying to people, if you could have only been alive back then, to the younger ones, to experience what it was like, because it is nothing like it was back then. It was, I can't even, not because I was 20, but because it truly was a destination. I mean, and people would come from all over the world, and they would be blown away, the nightlife that was there, not just the gay nightlife, but the straight nightlife too. Because there were like,
in our gay community alone back then, we had like almost 30 gay bars between the north, south, east, and west valleys at one time in Phoenix.
When I was telling Marshall earlier, I said you could go out for $1.50 a night at a beer bust and get drunk every single night of the week at a beer bust in a gay bar. Mm-hmm. And we used to.
And you said we did, bitch.
We did. He would get too full.
That's so funny. So in closing, what I would like to do is ask, so if you could each mention, if you had the chance to go back and watch one performer, iconic number, what would that be? Because I mean, it's like we've talked about so many different queens and different iconic numbers. That kind of, what do you look back and kind of like, oh, that kind of defines who that queen was?
That's a tough one, Marshall.
Well, I know. So that, I mean, it's like, because if it's like, personally, I wish I could see Tish Tanner of Salvation Army, because I've heard some people talk about that, and the joy that I see on people's faces as they're talking about it. We could also broaden that up to go. I mean, there were so many bars performing, but I'm assuming they all had like their own little nuances. So you wouldn't do the same show at Shamu's that you would do at the 307.
Well, I'll kind of dive in really quickly and say, Danny, if I know there's supposed to be one, but I'll do two. One would be Danny Reed doing Judy Garland, and you could just hear a pin drop. He was a trained actor, except and that from out of Tucson, and Danny Reed just was Judy. He was Judy. He had every inflection, everything new. The other thing, like some of the drag, some of the drag today would do, so that was really, really magical. And then the other one that I would have to say for me as a dancer would have to be Carmen Del Rio, because Carmen Del Rio would come to town and she was a trained tap and jazz dancer, and she would do a Donna Summers, and I was a disco baby. And I can't tell you how many dance contests that I won to Last Dance, and it's just sort of a signature for the disco era. And Carmen Del Rio would make literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars doing the medley of her, because it was a continuous orchestration. So that one number would be 7 minutes long, right? And Carmen would be able to hold the audience and just do nothing. She would just have to keep giving money away. So I would have to say for me, I mean, I love Ebb and everything like that, and we certainly did with Gladys Knight and all of that. But for me, as an audience member, sitting and looking at the stage, Carmen Del Rio just was awesome.
I would have to probably say to see Miss Woo Woo again, to do
I
Diana
was going to go there, but Darryl, yeah.
And because she was impeccable. In fact, when Diana Ross performed at the at Arizona State University, not at Gamage, but that other auditorium that was at ASU. Do you remember, Quentin?
The activity center?
Yes, that's where it was. And Diana Ross performed there, and she brought Robert up on stage with her to perform. And I think she did it was Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and she brought Robert up on stage with her in full drag, and they were like mirror clones of each other. But to see Robert probably do Ain't No Mountain High Enough would have to be it for me.
I will jump in, and because Marshall originally phrased it, something that you wish you had seen. When I came on the scene, Penelope Poupée had sort of started the decline in her health and then her career. And I had heard so many amazing things about her. And to this day, I still hear people talk about how creative and beautiful and glamorous and funny she was. So I wish I had seen Penelope at Davina and I always use a phrase about our divas, about being at the height of their diva superpowers. I wish I had seen Penelope at her most powerful and just like burning at a full wattage, because she's somebody that I don't know, that I sort of relate to in some ways, from hearing people talk about her and through my limited experiences with her. But I wish I had seen her at her best. So that's my wish.
Ted?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I've seen so many amazing performers and doing what they did. I would probably say one of the most amazing performances I ever saw was at Winx in 1990, I'm going to say 93, 94. And this performer was known as The Amazing Grace. And she was from Dallas, Texas. And she came on and she was known for doing Grace Jones in Dallas. But she decided to take a side turn with her career and do stand-up. And she would just come out in very glamorous drag, because a lot of times, people expected drag queens that do a comedy to always be in kind of a little bit of a, campy,
Wonky, yeah.
very clowny
Skag
type
drag.
of look. But she would come out in full glam, but then would slay you with her comedy. And she would be, again, one of those queens that very quick-witted, very pointed with her humor, but what was amazing to me that I would watch her is that, but she was the most glamorous drag comedian that I've ever seen before, because she was very slender and beautiful cheekbones, and she would just put on those what I call China doll bobs on that moved, and she would just walk around, and she would actually do a glam number but put a different spin on it. So like she would do I'm Every Woman by Whitney Houston, but she would have the DJ do like the extra dubbing, where she would be repeating herself over and over, woman, woman, woman. And she would do that as her number in between her speaking on the microphone. It was amazing. I thought that her show was one of the most brilliant approaches to drag that I've ever seen, but would give you all different types of personalities and different. It was amazing. That's all I'm going to say.
She would create these characters. Remember, she would do like dumb fish and smart fish.
Oh yeah, dumb fish, smart. Oh, and by the way, my favorite is when she would do black fish versus white fish. Black fish stew versus white fish stew, and it was unbelievable because she would nail each characterization down to the finest detail. It was amazing.
A legend.
And she no longer with us. Rest in power.
Well, for me, it started with the Jewel Box Review. And that's the first time I had a chance to really see the entertainment of drag and what the becomings of that and what that looked like. And I was hooked. I danced, everything, coming home, catching the bus. I thought, oh my God. I hung my boy clothes up and said, I'm going to be her. This is who I am. And it glued. It made sense for me to see that kind of, you knew that the anatomy was male underneath all those sequins. And I had to have that. And I thought, oh my God, this is her. And I've been that all my life.
And you did.
Yes. And it's wonderful to be able to talk about it because this pandemic has just really made me very depressed. And being back in school, I'm there with 10 children, and it's not what I would have wanted to do if the roles reversed. I couldn't have learned that way. And I'm really hoping that we go back to the normal. Thank you so much. And guys, you stay safe. And I just love looking out and seeing everything that you're doing and have done and the history. And when this pandemic is over, you will come over to the storytelling over at the church and we'll have this conversation again. Thank you.
Well, and Davina, I thought you might have gone down. At one point, we were chatting about Tish Tanner, but it was Tish as a boy in Janus Theater Troupe, which was our first LGBTQ theater troupe when he did the Ritz.
Yes.
And people talked about how him as a boy brought the house down.
Absolutely.
Even better than like the Broadway folks. It's like they saw both versions, and our little production here excelled over theirs.
It was an amazing performance and heavily supported by the community because as Quentin and Millye alluded to, and Sonova, the community, even though it was small, it was very tight. And so whenever a production like The Ritz would come on, we would go out and support it. And I remember as a youngin', I remember being told by everybody from my show director, Bobby Locke at Shamoose, to Penelope Poupée and says, "Oh, and girl, you will be there, won't you?" I'm all like, "Oh yeah, I'll be there." You know, I didn't understand that at the time, but you know, I said, "Sure, I'll be there," because I just wanted to be a part. You know, when you're a youngin', that's all you want to do. You just want to be a part of the magic of what's going on. But I'm so thrilled that I got a chance to see one of our regular drag performers actually go beyond the what do you call it, the parameters of just doing drag at a drag show in a real theater production, in a real acting role. And I have to admit, I give Mr. Gary Mangum, aka Tish Tanner, her props, baby, because she brought the house down and she did an amazing job. And that was my first time actually seeing a gay play that was based on gay themes. And so very lucky that I was exposed to that, you know, when I was 18 years old. You know, you're just like, you know, again, when you're young at that age, those type of moments are very life-changing. And you're able to see, you know, inklings of what this community that you've just become a part of, what it can do, and the talent, the pool of talent that it has. And it was very, very inspiring.
It's funny you say that about being young and having that impression with Tish, because I remember my first aha moment, my first wow, I'm part of a community, was I had started doing drag. I'd finally won a talent show or whatever, and or I'd done Tish's benefits or my drag mother Pussy LaHoot's benefits for whatever organizations they were doing. And Tish invited me to a party, and I had never been to a cocktail party. I'd never been to someone's house where they opened their house and their friends and the gays were there and they were wearing their finery and the queens were off duty. And I remember, like, to me, that is the moment that you described about like just being young and really impressed with what's going on in your community and being a part of something. It was going over to Tish Tanner's house, her little open house, and somebody in the message, like, I created a little watch party. They said they were asking who Tish Tanner was. So I just want to give a 101 on Tish. She was called the Clown Princess of the Southwest, and she was just every successful queen in this town. Take all of the things that they did and roll them into one, and that was Tish. You know, she was a performer, she was a comedian, she was a hostess, she was a volunteer, she was a charitable force to be reckoned with. She nurtured talent, and she did all that while still, you know, being a head diva in charge at several shows across town. And in addition to being a big woman, just the work that she did leaves such a big footprint in our community. So Tish Tanner is somebody that I think about, I don't want to say every day, but I think about her probably once a week. I still think about Tish, and she's been gone for, 20 years.
I mean, I think really Tish's name is the one that comes up the most often, and people just start waxing about it, which, I mean, it's kind of like one of the things I wish I could have seen her on stage, because everyone talks about her presence, her performance, and her timing, her comedic timing.
Oh, her timing.
Yeah, and she was amazing as far as comedic brilliance with what she did on stage. But not only could she do that with her numbers. Again, Salvation Army is the most one of the most popular that people still remember. But let me tell you something. When she got a hold of that mic, OMG, you better be ready. Because I would probably say she learned at the heels of Sissy Goldberg, going back to what Sonova was talking about, because she was brutal and brilliant as far as what she delivered. But let me tell you something. If you were a heckler or you were trying to, wrestle that mic away from her or try to detract from her, God forbid if she knew you, because she would call you out by name. And if she knew you by first and last name, she would say, Richard Stevens, and I quote, Richard Stevens, wrap your lips around that cocktail and shut the fuck up. I'm trying to make a living up here. And she would call you out like that on stage. And baby, the people would just hush. And then she would go into her last number was always her ballad that she would want to do, one glamour ballad number. And it was usually Surround Me with Love by Charlie McClain. And if you ever tried to mess with her, God help you, because she would slay you. She would slay you in front of everybody. And but other than that, though, yeah, I agree with what Barbara said. I think that's why she is an icon to this community, still well remembered, and very much loved by this community, because she was very much a trailblazer, not only a great performer, but activist, very instrumental in getting the Pride celebrations up and running. And
literally, Davina, literally.
Up and running, yes.
Right.
Like that whore would be out there hammering stakes into the ground to put up the tents. She wasn't too good for any of that.
Yeah, and if you all know, being heavier, she had a lot of health issues, but still, in the 120 degree summer heat, would be up there putting up tents and riding around in one of those motor scooters that they have, managing the grounds and making sure that we as a community had a Pride celebration worth celebrating for.
And then feeding people with HIV and AIDS on a Tuesday, and then in the Pride office on Thursday, and then on stage Thursday night, and I remember her standing outside of Charlie's. What was Quentin or Millye, you might remember, what was that organization that used to stand out in front of the bars with those water bottles and encourage you to put your change in?
Joshua Tree.
Joshua Tree.
Yeah, I thought. I thought it was Shanti, but you're right. It's Joshua Tree.
It was like a sharing weekend or something. Like she would be out there.
Yes.
She was just really a badass.
She was, and a fabulous person. Let me tell you.
Yeah. And bitch, remember, she had her phone. She had her phone in the name Tish Tanner. So if you had caller ID, it would say to bitch. Looking back, she probably had messed up her credit under her boy name. But she had her phone under the name Tish Tanner, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world.
Is Gay Pride happening this year?
It don't look like it.
No.
Really, because well, you know, because you're in close contact with Edward, Barbara. So Edward's a core member at the Pride, and Marshall, you should be able to speak to that as well.
I mean, from what I've heard, they have not said they're canceling or they're not canceling. So
yeah, I know it's November 7th. November 7th.
The plan was to move it to November, and there are no collateral materials out. There's no advertisements. There's no anything. It ain't happening.
Well, I mean, I would still be optimistic and let them take the lead on that, really, Richard, because
it ain't happening.
They've really said that they have it up on their webpage that it's November 7th. They have the acts confirmed as DJ, my alter ego, DJ Nathan Quinn. I'm one of the lineup there to appear. So, they haven't given us a cancellation notice as of yet. So that's what I'll say, is because it's what I know.
Well, I made other plans, and you should too.
There you have it.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of organizations are waiting till like almost like the day of to actually cancel, hoping that something will happen that will change. So, I mean, there's not been an official word, as far as I know, from Pride about what that weekend will look like.
It would be so nice if it happened, because it would be after election day, and we might have good news. Who knows?
Right. I mean, even.
Thank you, Darryl.
This is Jody Watley. Jody Watley's going to be there.
Yeah, and from what I was understanding before, Deborah Cox has agreed to come, so because she was on schedule prior.
Probably won't happen.
So.
And I know the third Saturday of November, there's the Grand Marshals, which our former Pride board chairs and directors. So we're going to do a panel with some of them talking about the history of Phoenix Pride since celebrating its 40th year. And so I chose to do it after the parade, just in case there is some sort of a virtual parade or something. I didn't want to conflict with that or anything. So, but that way people can hear also those stories about early Pride and what did it look like and what did it feel like.
Well, let's just send our community organizations all of our good fairy dust and hope that, we come out of this mist and this grayness with some joie de vivre, darlings.
Why don't we do a virtual drag show and get lineup of drag queens to perform, and for benefit for AIDS Project, the AIDS Project in Phoenix. How does that sound?
So yeah, have no idea kind of if they've set up any sort of alternative plans. So
I think we should do that, Marshall. You should do that.
Oh God, no. That takes so much coordination, and to get all those. I mean, it's like even like some of the shows like the Queer Agenda happening at Stacy's. It's like I hear about kind of the coordination of trying to even get those video performances, not even live performances, ready to go. So that's a little bit more than I'm willing to chew on. So, but I want to thank you all so much for joining us as we got a chance to take a walk down memory lane and talk about some amazing performers, some of who are no longer with us, some who are still around. But thank you so much for sharing that history and helping to educate all of us in terms of how did we get here.
Hey, Marshall, and
thanks for having us.
In that vein, I know I would just like to do a shout out. Maybe everyone in the chat would like to do that, or everybody in the group, and just do a shout out in memory of some of the people that we talked about. So I know that I would like to just send love and memories and respect to Tish Tanner, Penelope Poupée, and the Abusa, Miss Ebony, and dedicate this to them.
And to Miss Woo Woo, rest in power.
Charlene Champagne, Russell Taft, who were the other pips that have expired. Casey Starr, who's expired. Woo Woo, who's expired. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Richard, in mentioning that, because we do need to remember them. They, were way showers and trailblazers. So
Ebony Shane and Chantel Douglas.
Oh, Chantel Douglas. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Ebony Shane, Chantel Douglas. So,
and again, yeah. I think there's names coming up that I haven't heard before, and I'm like, damn. So I'll be hitting you up to kind of get some stories about some of those queens. I mean, I don't think I've heard of the name Chantel Douglas before. So.
Oh my goodness, talk about a beautiful queen. Oh my gosh. Chantel Douglas did work at full. She was sushi, honey. I will say that. She was true sushi.
She's one of the most frightening queens to ever hit this town, in my opinion. I was scared of her.
And Davina, how about you? Would you like to give a shout out to any of those stage queens before you?
Oh gosh, most definitely. You know what? I would probably say Carmen Del Rio I'm going to shout out to her, because I'm glad Quentin found those pictures of Carmen Del Rio, because she was definitely one of those performers that I saw as a youngin' that, obviously, of course, and Miss Ebony, my drag mother, of course, but my other sister, Casey Starr, of course.
Oh, okay.
Who else do I want to shout out to? Gosh, there's so many, but those are the ones that I can definitely think of right off the top of my head.
And Millye, how about you?
I just want to shout out to the world that I'm still standing, and I am looking in the face of so many of you, and I continue, and let's continue to keep this message going. Thank you.
So thank you all. And I would say, I guess I would give a shout out to Lady Cassandra, who is still on stage, but now with puppets.
Yes.
She was watching. Did you see her?
Oh
Daniel
no,
Dahl.
I did not see her. Okay, cool. I'm glad she was watching. So, and again,
Lady-
One of the fiercest performers, Lady Cassandra.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I love that there's still some video of her showing up. It's like as she's going through and finding things, it's like she'll post some of those videos. And so, and I love the different bars and getting a chance to take a little peek into that world.
She was
This
a
is the thing,
twisted
Marshall.
ticket.
This is the thing that Darryl was saying earlier. People, because everybody says that their home city and where they come from was the fiercest area and whatever. But literally, we went to Los Angeles. We were imported. I went to New York City, equipped to compete in New York City because I had already been seasoned well here in Arizona. So when I went to New York, it was nothing. There was nothing. When I went to American Bandstand, Darryl, we all went on American Bandstand. When we came, we were the force from Phoenix, Arizona, and people were just gobsmacked at our presence. Not to try to be self-aggrandizing or anything, but it was just because we had already been seasoned well here in Arizona. We had already had an identity that we had managed to etch out for ourselves. That was comparable to what we understand as the necessary stealth and metal that you have, salt that you have to have to really be distinctive in even Hollywood. We chew those Hollywood girls up and spit them out, especially on the dance floor, darling. There was nothing at Odyssey and Geno's and all of the signature clubs in Hollywood. From Phoenix, Arizona, we were a force, baby. The A group. Okay, the A group, darling. We came through.
So again, thank you all for sharing your stories and helping educate all of us about just our own community. And I look forward to seeing each one of you and at some point being able to actually give you a hug. So have a great rest of your Saturday.
Thank you for doing this, Marshall. And thank you for inviting
doing
us.
the job.
Bye, Denise.
Bye, Melly. Bye,
Thank
Davina.
you. Bye.
Bye.